There's a place called Pulau Tokan Sungal. It's a remote, uninhabited island off the Malaysian coast. All dive companies avoid this actual spot. That's because it has brutal currents, unpredictable conditions, and a history of people dying there. But one company wanted to give a vacationing family the experience of a lifetime. Instead, they led them straight into a twisted nightmare, and not everyone made it out alive. Pulau Tokan Racket is a place that divers usually just never go to because it's kind of just a rock that's exposed in the middle of the ocean, and the water surrounding it has riptides and channel currents that can pull you out into very deep water. The deaths that have happened there are kind of kept under wraps. All of it is buried and off the record. The stories that do pass through are very brutal. Stories of divers getting dragged miles out into the open sea and never found again. Others are recovered in pieces, and locals say that what happens there doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. It's a very unique spot, but not in a good way. But the group, they didn't know that. The resort pitched it as an untouched dive site, something that was very special and off the map. So if you thought Pulau Tokan Racket was bad, Pulau Tokan Sungal is even worse. It has stronger currents, and it also has a circular surge that wraps around the tiny deserted island. It's a place that should be permanently closed, but it's not, because dive companies still want to sell an adventure and make extra profits. The Chester's family lived in Kuala Lumpur. Adrian worked for a Shell oil company, and his wife Andrea was Dutch. They had 2 kids, Haley and 13-year-old Nathan. They were a tight-knit family, and Nathan was at that age where he really liked to explore and try new things. In April 2022, they decided to book a trip to the Sea Gypsy Resort on Cebu Island. And their whole plan was just to relax, hang out, have fun, make some memories, and of course, go diving. Adrian and Nathan were taking their PADI Advanced Open Water course. They had already done their beginner course with instructor Christine Grodum. She was a really cool Norwegian diver who worked with the resort. One other diver was going to join them, and that was 18-year-old Alexia Molina, and she was French. The first dive that the resort had planned for them was at Pulau Tokan Racket, and the second dive was at Pulau Tokan Sungal. It's April 6th, and the group boarded the boat in good spirits and set out for their first dive site. The ride was pretty calm and uneventful, and it didn't take much to remember how alone they were. There was no boat traffic, no backup, and no noise. Just open sea in every direction. The first dive of the day at Pulau Tokan Racket went pretty smoothly. Adrian was happy with it, and him and Nathan completed their deep dive without any issues. The current was strong though. Even though they were able to handle it, they thought that was going to be the worst of the entire trip. Nathan was trying to act tough, and he didn't let his dad know that he almost had a panic attack when he could feel that his swimming was almost not beating the current. After surfacing, they took a short break and got a light snack. Then, around 11:40 a.m., the group prepared for the second dive. This one would be a drift dive, so they were expecting to have the current pull them a little bit, but not too much. The boat worked its way over to Pulau Tokan Sungal. Things kind of fell off. Adrian contemplated just skipping the next dive and going back to the resort. He noticed that Nathan was acting tough, but it didn't seem like it. It was noted that the captain could see the uneasiness in the group, and he quickly looked at them and said, "If we go back early, you're still going to be charged for both dives, so you might as well do this dive." The group thought about it for a little bit, and then decided they're just going to go ahead with the dive. By 12 p.m., the group was in the water again. Christine gave a quick check and signaled for everyone to descend. From the moment they dropped beneath the surface, something was wrong. The current wasn't just strong, it was alarmingly pulling the divers apart. Within minutes, it began pulling the group sideways at speed in different directions. Christine tried to keep them together, but visibility was poor, and control was impossible. They stayed low, drifting with the current. Some started to scream through their regulators, which burns air at a faster rate, and is something you are trained not to do unless it is an emergency. Christine was giving the sign to surface because the situation was incredibly dangerous. But she didn't know that the rest of the group was already in the process of surfacing because they were freaked out. They just wanted to get back in the boat and cancel the trip. Even though they were told they were going to be safe the whole time by the resort, the captain, and Christine, they no longer believed anyone, and especially the captain. Somehow, they all ended up going back up to the surface, and they started looking around. There was no boat. They scanned the waterline. Nothing. No sign of the captain. No flag, no marker. Just the open ocean. The current was so strong, it pulled them at a rapid pace, and they had no idea how far they were pulled out until they surfaced. Christine inflated her surface marker buoy to try to signal for help. This is a standard practice for normal conditions, but to Christine, she realized this was something more. She kind of kept it to herself, but she was starting to have a panic attack. The group huddled together, treading water. Adrian kept a firm grip on Nathan. Alexia stayed close. Christine looked toward the horizon. She was searching everywhere. She couldn't see anything. Far out in the distance, she saw something very small. It looked like the boat. The group waved, yelled, and splashed as hard as they could, but there was no response. The boat was drifting away, further and further. They were being left behind. According to the captain, Camille bin Qasim, he lost sight of the group during the dive, and he said that he followed their bubbles for 15 minutes and then he lost complete track of them, and he called his boss for instructions. He says he never saw them surface. It was now past 12:30 p.m. The group had been on the surface for over 20 minutes. The currents continued pulling them out. The coastline shrank in the distance. There was no safety whistle, no backup surface markers, no GPS tracking. They had nothing. Then Christine made a decision. She told them she was going to swim for help. She didn't wait for a discussion. She just turned and started swimming towards the last known direction of the boat. No plan, no signal. Adrian was stunned. He yelled after her, "Are you sure?" No response. Christine was already paddling away, chasing the current that had swept them out. That'd be the last time they ever saw her. The group was now 3, Adrian, Nathan, and Alexia, drifting. No land in sight, no boat, no guide, no gear. The sun beat down on them and the waves rose higher. It was hard to stay close. Minutes passed, then hours. By that time, the current had already swept the divers miles from where they were dropped off. They were being carried out to sea, and the nightmare was just beginning. Adrian looked at his son. Nathan was only clutching his regulator, wide-eyed. Beside them, Alexia tried to stay calm. There was no land, no shelter, just wind, salt, and heat. They had no mirrors, and worse, no one was coming. The currents around Palau Tokan Sungal can take a person 10 miles offshore in an hour. By the time boats arrive, it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. As the afternoon wore on, the sun beat down. Their wetsuits became ovens. Salt burned their eyes and lips. Nathan clung to his dad, his breath shallow. Alexia floated nearby, conserving energy. They tried to talk, to stay focused, but the vast emptiness around them had crushed any sense of time or place. Still, there was no boats. They continued to look around. Back at Sea Gypsy Resort, the Malaysian Maritime Police were called. The Royal Navy sent a vessel. From the perspective of the resort, this was a full-blown emergency now. Far after when it should have been. From the perspective of Adrian, it had already become something worse. The tide was changing again. He gripped Nathan tighter, trying to calm him. He was dehydrated, exhausted, and scared. His mask had come loose. He was swallowing seawater. Every few minutes, a wave would crash over them, forcing Adrian to hold him up by his BCD, which is a vest that scuba divers wear to control descent and ascent, but also functions as a life vest as long as it has no holes in it. Alexia, a stranger just a few hours ago, was now a lifeline. The 3 stayed close. None of them said it, but they all knew the clock was ticking. Somewhere out there, Christine was swimming alone. And all around them, the South China Sea continued to pull them further and farther from everything that could save them. And night was coming. Adrian pulled out his dive reel and tied the three of them all together. It was crude, but it was all he could do. If one of them slipped under, the others would feel it, and if someone lost consciousness, they wouldn't drift away unnoticed. At first, they tried to stay positive. Adrian kept talking to Nathan, asking him about video games, music, pretty much anything, and Alexia stayed close and listened in. They all took turns scanning the horizon, but there was nothing. As the hours passed, things just got worse. Adrian kept checking his son's face. Nathan was trying to be brave, but his eyes were dull. His mouth cracked from salt and dehydration. He said he was fine, but Adrian could feel the tremble in his voice. Back on land, the nightmare was being mishandled. Andrea, Adrian's wife and Nathan's mom, was still at the resort, and she was told to pack up Adrian and Nathan's room. Management said that they needed it for new guests and that she had to get out of there ASAP. She was shocked when they also asked her to pay up front for a search boat. No apologies, no urgency. They seemed like they could care less. The Sea Gypsy wanted the problem off their property. Meanwhile, the group drifted further. At some point in the afternoon, they spotted a speck on the horizon. They screamed. Adrian raised an arm and then waved both of his arms. Alexia joined him. Nothing. The speck just moved on. The sun started to fall. With it came the dread of night. The temperature dropped. The sky turned slate gray, then black. The three huddled close. The dive reel line still kept them all together. Adrian felt Nathan hitting him and asked him to stop. Then realized Nathan was shivering so hard he couldn't stop himself. And Nathan could no longer talk. Waves smacked them without warning. One moment flat, the next a 6-foot wave swell slammed into their backs, forcing them underwater. Every few minutes, one of them would slip beneath the surface, only to pop back up, coughing and gasping. It was disorienting and horrifying. Sometime near midnight, they thought they heard an engine, a faint hum, then nothing. Maybe it was real, maybe it was not. The darkness and dehydration played tricks on them. Nathan was still shivering uncontrollably. His lips were turning blue. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Adrian forced himself to stay awake, to keep talking, to keep his son alert. Every time Nathan nodded off, Adrian shook him gently. "Stay with me," he said. "You're doing great." The seconds stretched into hours. At this point, Alexia stopped speaking. Her breath slowed. Adrian reached out and gripped her shoulder. He asked her if she was okay. She opened an eye and then closed it. The group was still drifting, still waiting. Morning was hours away, and no one knew where they were. By sunrise on April 7th, they had been drifting for nearly 18 hours. The night was very cold, and hypothermia had set in for the three. The sun came up fast and bright through the clouds. The black water turned silver blue. It should have been a relief, but it wasn't. It warmed them up a bit, but now they were more aware of their dire situation. Adrian knew that they were all going to die soon. The light exposed everything: their cracked skin, their sunburned faces, their hopeless surroundings. They were now far beyond Malaysian waters, somewhere in the vast spread between Malaysia and Indonesia, being carried further every hour by the current they could not fight. Nathan had stopped all movements. His head sagged, his arms floated limp at his sides. Adrian adjusted the reel line, pulling Nathan in closer, cradling him with one arm, trying to tread water with the other. He whispered encouragement, "We'll get out of this." But his voice sounded thin, even to himself. Alexia was silent too. Her body bobbed, her eyes closed. Every now and then, she jerked awake and blinked in confusion. She was dehydrated, sunburned, fading. She asked Adrian what was going on, and in her severely dehydrated delusional state, she had no idea that she was stranded in the middle of the ocean. Adrian's mind ran in loops. He couldn't stop imagining what would happen if he let go of Nathan. He couldn't stop wondering about how long a body could stay in its current hostile state. Around midday, they saw movement in the water. It looked like a fin at first, but Adrian wasn't sure. He put on his mask and looked in the water. A dark shape glided beneath them. Slow, steady. A shark. It just passed underneath, silent and huge. Adrian didn't say anything. He didn't want Nathan to panic, but he knew what this meant. He tried to ignore it because there was nothing he could do. Then he just started to think about family memories, but that was disrupted when something bumped into his leg. He pretended it wasn't happening, and then it happened again. He thought it was the shark, and this was going to be the end. He said a prayer and closed his eyes. The group couldn't do anything. Then he felt a sting on his hand. That woke him up, and then another sting. It was jellyfish. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Their thin tentacles glazed the water surface. A few continued to touch Adrian, stinging like fire. Nathan flinched, but didn't say or do anything. Alexia did the same, but none of them had the strength to swim away. By the evening, Nathan was not responsive. His lips were cracked open. Adrian grabbed him by the eyes and opened them up. They didn't focus. He then tried to give him water from their backup regulator, squeezing drops from the hose, but Nathan couldn't swallow. The sun dipped below the waterline. Night came again. This one was worse. No stars, no moon, only the dark. The waves didn't crash anymore. Adrian tried to keep everyone together, but Nathan stopped responding. Adrian gripped him harder, pressing their foreheads together. He sang softly, told a story about when Nathan was 5 chasing chickens in a village in France. Nothing. At some point, maybe near midnight, Nathan's head slumped fully. His breathing stopped. Adrian screamed. He shook him, slapped his face, tried everything. Nothing worked. Then he just held him. For hours. He held his son's body in the black water and cried until his voice disappeared. He was so dehydrated there was no tears. Eventually he passed out from exhaustion. Then he woke. The sun was rising again. It was April 8th. The dive line was still in his hand, but Nathan was gone. Just gone. Adrian asked Alexia if she was still alive. She made a quick moan and then went silent. They floated on with the current, continuing to pull them. On April 9th, sometime in the morning, Adrian saw something on the horizon. A floating platform. A keelong, which is an offshore fish farm. It didn't look real at first, like a mirage, but it didn't move. Adrian decided he would swim over to it best he could and pull Alexia. It took hours. Every kick burned. Every stroke pulled muscle from bone. But they made it. There was a fisherman inside, and he pulled them out and gave them water. Adrian used the man's phone to call the dive resort. A boat came later that day. They were taken to a hospital in Johor Bahru. They had survived nearly 72 hours in the open sea. Adrian and Alexia were alive, but they weren't whole. At the hospital, Adrian and Alexia were treated for dehydration, hypothermia, sun exposure, and psychological trauma. Adrian wasn't sure if what just happened was real or if it was just a nightmare. He kept having flashes of Nathan in his arms while in the Black Sea. The doctors asked Adrian questions, but he couldn't speak. He was unable to process reality, and as a result, his brain could not stitch together a sentence. Some words eventually came out, but they made no sense. The doctors thought the dehydration caused him brain damage. Andrea and Haley were waiting, but Nathan wasn't with them. No one had to ask. Adrian's face told them everything. His body had slipped beneath the surface sometime during the second night. Adrian had held him for hours, but when he woke, the rope he had tied around him was slack. In the days that followed, Sea Gypsy Resort offered no apology, no answers, no accountability. Instead, they told Andrea to pay for the boat that had rescued Adrian. It cost $8,000. The resort suggested that she could submit the receipt to Shell Oil Company, Adrian's employer, for reimbursement. They didn't ask how Nathan died. They didn't ask what went wrong. They just asked Andrea for the room keys. Eventually, Adrian and Andrea filed a lawsuit. It wasn't about the money for them. It was about the truth. about making sure this couldn't happen again. The lawsuit named Sea Gypsy resort manager Richard Wills, the boat captain Camille Ben Kassim, and instructor Christine Grodum. It accused them of gross negligence, failure to provide proper equipment, and ignoring multiple critical safety protocols. Sea Gypsy denied everything. They said Christine wasn't their employee, just a contractor. They said she bore all the responsibility for what happened. They used emails signed with the resort's name and address as proof that she wasn't officially theirs. They then blamed Adrian and Nathan. They said diving was an extreme sport and that Adrian had signed a waiver, that Nathan was too inexperienced for the course, that neither of them brought their own safety whistles or gear. They called it contributory negligence. As if Adrian, the man who kept his son alive for 48 hours in the open sea, was the one at fault. They also defended the boat captain. He'd been hired to work there a week before. He had no diving experience. He didn't speak English. He didn't know how to use GPS. He was later found to have substances in his system during the trip. But the Sea Gypsy insisted they had done nothing wrong. They said the captain tried to follow the bubbles and that he searched for as long as he could. They admitted he lost sight of the divers, but claimed it wasn't his fault. Malaysian authorities fined the resort about $1,000 for not having enough crew on the boat. That was the extent of the penalty. Adrian and Andrea were left to pay for their own rescue. The lawsuit laid out the full extent of the resort's failures. No safety whistles, no working surface markers, no GPS, no dive logs, no functioning radios, no emergency backup plan, no basic accountability. The kind of negligence you'd expect in a disaster movie, not from a certified PADI resort. PADI, the global diving accreditation body, launched an investigation. They suspended the dive center's status for a while. Eventually, they reinstated it. Some changes were made, but the resort is still open. Palau Tokan Sungal is still open. Dive companies still take their guests there. They call it a hidden gem, a real adventure, a dive you'll never forget. For one family, that was true, but not in the way anyone should have to remember. This was a heavy one, but if sharing this story can help even one person stay safe, it's worth it. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. I've got more stories just like this coming up, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one.